While there are always trace amounts of radiation all around us, there used to be a lot more. Back before we realized the dangers of long-term exposure, here are 10 common things that used to be radioactive. Water. Back in the day, it was believed that radium, uranium, and other radioactive materials could cure all sorts of illnesses and ailments. In the United States, one of the most popular products was the Revigator, a water jug lined with uranium. It was advertised as a cure for just about anything, including arthritis, senility, and flatulence. Hundreds of thousands of these jugs were sold, but no one realized that in addition to radiation, it also released lead and arsenic into the water. Entertainment. During the 1950s, the fear caused by the Cold War had Americans in a tizzy. Instead of sitting idly by, however, the United States was using the Nevada desert as a nuclear test site, just in case. Back then, the casinos in Las Vegas used it to attract tourists. They served atomic cocktails and hosted parties where gamblers would play until the first bomb went off less than 100 miles away, lighting up the sky like dawn. The downside was prolonged exposure caused many people to experience mild radiation poisoning, and it contaminated the water. Makeup. Back in the 1930s, a man named Alfred Curie, no relation to Marie Curie, created a line of cosmetics in France. He claimed his products were the very latest in anti-aging creams and also sold powders, lipsticks, and perfumes. There was just one problem. All of his cosmetics contained thorium and radium. At the time, people were not concerned about the risk of radioactive exposure. They only cared about the supposed beautifying effects. He called his products Thoradia, and they were all the rage until the French government began to regulate the use of radioactive material in 1937. He tried to keep the brand going, but without the novelty of the radioactive material, it fell out of favor, leaving Curie bankrupt. Dishes. Before the 1960s, many companies used thorium, potassium-40, and uranium-based ceramic paints and glazes in their dishes. The Homer Laughlin China Company, for example, used to use depleted uranium oxide in their brightly colored Fiestaware sets, giving them that rich red color. For the plain white ceramic dishes, they used all-natural uranium. The entire line was discontinued in 1972 due to the possible risk with prolonged use, especially if used with acidic foods that could leach the radioactive materials right from the dinnerware. Virility aids. Before Viagra, there were still men having issues with blood flow direction. In the 1920s, there were several methods to alleviate this problem, but the most popular was the Radi-endocrinator. It was marketed towards sexually weak men and cost roughly $1,000, a pretty steep price for the time. It was a small radium slip that was meant to be worn in the underwear and sat beneath the scrotum. It was to be worn at night to increase virility once the user was charged up. Its popularity dipped, however, when the inventor died of bladder cancer in 1949. Pacemakers. In 1973, a U.S. surgeon implanted a nuclear-powered pacemaker containing plutonium into a 20-year-old woman. More than 40 years later, it's still going due to the longevity of the radioactive element, which has a half-life of 88 years. Over the years, 139 people have received the first versions of the nuclear pacemaker, and there are still 9 in use. The device tends to outlive the patient. Nowadays, pacemakers are powered with lithium batteries and deliver adjustable currents rather than steady jolts. Chocolate. Between 1931 and 1936, a German company called Birk & Braun sold radium-infused chocolate that claimed to make people younger. It was called Radium Chocolade. Their ads made outrageous claims like chocolate is one of the most important nutrients and that radium was very good for you. Not long after the chocolates fell out of popularity, the FDA began to crack down on the falsehoods regarding the health benefits of radioactive materials, and the fad began to fade. Golf balls. Produced by Oak Ridge Atom Industries Incorporated, these unique golf balls were guaranteed to never be lost because you could locate them easily with a Geiger counter. These expensive balls contained cobalt-60 or radium and were called the atomic golf ball. They were introduced in the early 1950s and were still made well into the 1960s. Versions of the ball were even made during the 90s, but they were irradiated by an electron beam instead of being made using radioactive cores. Toys. Back in the early 1940s, there were toys like the radiumscope, a telescope containing a piece of radium that could double as a nightlight due to its tendency to glow in dark rooms. There were also child-sized Geiger counters that were advertised as safe, exciting, and instructive, tools for teaching children to prospect for uranium in their own backyards. By the 1960s, there was also the Atomic Energy Lab, a science kit that contained real radium and uranium ore in order to perform experiments at home. Toothpaste. During the Second World War, Germany introduced radioactive Sonnencreme, a toothpaste that contained radioactive thorium. The label promised users that the atomic properties of the toothpaste would leave teeth extremely white and shiny. It also boasted its ability to kill bacteria and leave your breath smelling fresher. Thousands of people bought it, despite its hefty price tag. Even dentists got in on the craze and began mixing small amounts of uranium into dentures to give them a whiter and more realistic look under artificial light. Well, folks, do you have any of these radioactive gems still kicking around in your house? Maybe you should consider disposing of them by calling the government. Now that this is done, why don't you check out these other videos we have here for you, like this one, tell us what you thought down below, and don't forget to subscribe to The Richest. Bye-bye.